Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Stone. I'm your host, Robert Runyon. Today, I'm gathered with Thomas Schmell from FE International. Thomas, how you doing today?
I'm good, Robert. Thanks for very much for having me on.
I'm excited to have you on the show, and I appreciate you being here. So we're going to be talking about some really amazing things, and you work for FE International. Tell me a little bit about you, your background, and FE International. Brag on yourself and your company.
Yeah, sure. So I founded FE. I'm now CEO. Founded FE in 2010. We've been in the industry for over 11 years now. We work with business owners in the online space. That might be e-commerce, could be Amazon, could be software, could be content-based businesses, a real range in the online world, who are looking to ultimately sell their business. And the service we provide is the whole M&A process, so all the way through from valuation to final sale. Just for some perspective, over the last 11 years, we've closed over 1,200 transactions now, so 1,200 successful exits. That's well over $1 billion in total value. We work on a range of businesses. So we have clients with revenue below $1 million. We have clients with revenue above 50 million, a real range. Generally speaking, valuations all the way up to about 100 million. So a real range in there. Our head office is in New York. We have a team in London. I'm based in San Francisco. We have a team in Miami, and we have a few remote people as well. I think the team in total at the moment across all of the different things we do, about 110. So we have quite a big team, and about half of those work specifically on the M&A side of the business. So I guess we're here today just kind of discussing the kind of things you can do to get your business ready to sell. We spend a lot of time with people, often years in advance before selling their business, until either they're ready or they decide they want to go ahead. So it's always good to kind of talk through the early stages of the process so people kind of understand when it makes sense to reach out and maybe start a process.
Yep. FE International has done some amazing things. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about today is maximizing the value of your Amazon e-commerce business, because we're going to show the most effective ways to find the right buyers for your business, plus a few extras. That's coming up next on Behind the Stone. Welcome back to the Sunken Stone channel, where e-commerce brands, agencies, and do-it-yourselfers receive tips, tricks, and tutorials to improve strategy, growth, and operations every week. So be sure to subscribe. Just click the red subscribe button right below, or click on our channel page to see more videos. So Thomas, say you've built a successful e-commerce business. Maybe you're struggling to decide the best way to sell your business. One of the things we're going to talk about is all things that you need to consider when thinking about the best practices behind the acquisition process. Thomas, can you speak to that? Do you have any examples you could provide?
Yeah, so I think the very first thing anyone should do, and like I said, we work for over 1,200 people now, so we see this time and time again. The most important thing you need to do at the very start of the process, if you've been thinking about selling a business, is decide what you're actually trying to achieve from that exit. So it may well be, and that's usually, for most people, it's either a financial or a time-based goal. And what I mean by that is either you want a specific number. So it might be, I want $1 million, $10 million, $50 million. There's not a right or wrong answer to that. There's nothing you can do, I can do to tell them what that number is. You need to decide how much you ultimately want to sell your business for. Or it might be a time-based goal. It might be, hey, I want to pay off my mortgage. I want to pay off my tuition fees. I want to retire. It could be anything, but usually a specific goal by which you want to achieve your exit. Once you have that, the best thing to do is then figure out what your business is worth. The best way to do that is find other companies in your industry, usually an M&A firm, so a company like FE International. Most credible companies will put together a free valuation for you. And you want to find a business that's sold companies very similar to yours in the past. It's usually quite easy to figure out who's done that.
Can you talk a little bit about that valuation? Like in terms of why would a company, or why does a company need to increase its valuation, or why is a valuation important? Like what kind of metric is that?
Yeah, so it's the most important reason to get a valuation is to establish how far away you are from your goal or your expectation. So let's say you've decided I'm Robert, I want to sell my business by the end of the next year, I want at least $1 million. And I tell you today your business is worth $500,000, then you probably have quite a lot of work to do to get it to be worth $1 million. But if you say to me, hey, Thomas, I want to sell my business for $10 million, and the valuation we give you today is 9.5 million, then you probably don't really need to do anything to get to that $10 million valuation level, other than maybe just wait a few more months for a little bit more growth. So the reason you get the valuation is not necessarily because you're committing to a sale process. You shouldn't have to pay anything for a valuation with any credible firm in the industry, but it helps set expectations and helps set your goals and what you need to do, because you could be a very long way away from your target valuation and your goal might not be realistic to achieve soon. You might just need to be patient and wait, or you might be much closer or even ahead of your goal, and then maybe you decide you want to sell now, or maybe you change your goal. Maybe you say, okay, well, my business is worth 9.5 million now. Maybe I want to get to 20 million, and I'm happy to spend another 2 or 3 years working to get towards that. So that's why the valuation is most important. It's really just to kind of set expectations and help you determine your plan, because the things we can talk about, they do somewhat vary, like how far away you are from your ultimate goal.
And with that valuation, right? Like, say it is at $500,000, and you want to get to $1 million, or say it's at $1 million and you want to get to 10 million. What are some of the things that people can do to increase their valuation? Is this investments that they need to make, such as, WeFunder, crowdfunding campaigns, things like that? Or is it, hire internal staff? What exactly would you recommend for people listening or watching right now?
Yeah, so firstly, it depends a lot on the business. So one of the advantages of getting a valuation is, as part of that process, at least if you're talking about FE International's process, we will then identify things that you do particularly well or particularly badly. So we might say, oh, compared to similar businesses we've sold, your team is smaller than average, or your average order value on Amazon is smaller than average, or your return on ad spend is lower than average if you're buying ads. So it could be all sorts of different things it would be, but we can help you identify that in quite like a customized way. But in general, the things buyers are looking for are growing revenue. So people want to buy businesses which are growing. It doesn't mean you can't sell a business which is flat or not growing, but it's easier and you're going to get more money for a business that's growing. The business needs to be, particularly if it's a e-commerce business or Amazon business, whatever you want to call it, has to be profitable. So there's no point on Amazon, you could effectively build a $10 million business that makes no money, $10 million revenue business that makes no money, because you spend it all on unprofitable ads. Mm-hmm. So the business does at least need to be profitable to be sellable, and to be worth more in general, it needs to be more profitable. So there are lots of different ways you can go about that. It could be increasing your revenue. So to your point, it could be hire more people. Maybe you need to improve your logistics so you get product from supplier to customer faster. Maybe you need there to be less returns, so maybe that needs a better QA process. Lots of different, maybe your return on ad spend isn't very good, so you need to hire an agency, or you need to hire a person to kind of take over that. Maybe you have your own store as well as your Amazon storefront, and maybe your own website needs to be improved. Maybe you need a better way to capture orders, or bigger orders, different orders, customized orders, whatever that might be. So there are all sorts of different things you can do to increase that value, but it really depends on the business. There's no simple formula. For example, to double the value of your business, you do not necessarily need to double the amount you're spending on ads, double the size of your team, double the amount of SKUs you sell, or anything like that. It could just be one or two small things you need to change. So that's why it's important to get that valuation early, because you'll also get an idea of what other companies that have been sold do well and what they don't do so well.
So let's say that we've nailed the acquisition process, and we've hit that valuation, and we're preparing to sell our business. what are things that people should know before that exit, about preparation for a successful exit?
So firstly, and particularly for Amazon sellers, I'd say the very most important thing you can do is get your financials or your books in good order. So many e-commerce businesses we work with have really messy financials. So they might keep at least some numbers, but they're not very accurate. So depending on the size of your business, you could just hire a part-time bookkeeper, you could hire a contract bookkeeper. You might need a full-time in-house bookkeeper. And then exactly the same for an accountant as well. So I'd recommend at the very least, the most important thing to do if you are going to sell your business successfully, your numbers have to be in good order. So if you work with a company like us, we'll run a due diligence process before we list the business to audit your financials and make sure they're accurate. But the mistake we see people do a lot of the time is they'll try sell the business themselves before they come to us. They'll send a buyer financials, a buyer might make an offer, and then the offer will fall through because they'll realize there's discrepancies. And it's not usually because the seller is intentionally misrepresenting their numbers, it's just because they got it wrong. Maybe they overstated COGS or understated COGS, didn't understand return on ad spend, forgot that they were employing people, whatever it might be. We've seen all sorts. So the most important thing you can do is get your financials in good order.
And how long does your process take?
So it depends on the size of the business, but generally our audit process, so from valuation through to getting the business listed, so then out there where our M&A team take over and are reaching out to acquirers, usually 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the size and the complexity of the business. So for example, $1 million business will probably take 2 weeks. A $50 million business with like 2 warehouses, 3 offices will probably take more like a month. And then from there, the actual sale process, again, can vary depending on the time and the complexity of the business, but generally somewhere between 30 and 60 days to finalize bids on offers. We usually run we do a lot of outreach. So it's not just, a lot of people think you can only sell your business to an aggregator, for example. They might be part of our outreach, but also private equity firms who no one has ever heard of, but they've raised $1 billion and they're looking to acquire businesses, might be reaching out to individuals, strategic buyers. So that's where the process takes a bit of time. It's not that you could get an offer on day one if you just go to an aggregator, but generally they're not going to be giving you the best offer. So we'll run a 30 to 60 day process, get as many buyers into the process as possible. And then closing from there, once an offer's been agreed, again, depends a bit on the size of the business. I'd say generally a smaller business, say $1 million business might be 2 weeks. And then a $50 million business, usually 60 to 90 days on average to close. So the process can take start to finish anywhere from, say, 45 days for a small deal that's going fast to maybe up to 6 months for a much bigger, more complex deal where there's lots of moving parts. Often there'll be in-person meetings as part of the due diligence process, have to meet the team, have to understand suppliers, all of that stuff. Hence why it takes a little bit of time.
So we're talking about some big numbers here, large and small, from 1 million to 50 million. Let's talk about fees. What kind of fees are sellers and buyers both looking at? Nothing good in life ever comes without fees.
That you definitely get what you pay for in this industry. I'll say you get like a real range of fee quotes out there. So I'd say the things you need to think about, firstly, as a buyer, you generally shouldn't be paying a fee. There might be like an administrative fee or an escrow fee or something like that. So we have a very small fee for buyers to cover some administration related to escrow and some general paperwork. But generally, you shouldn't be paying 10% of the deal value or anything, because the M&A firm is generally getting paid by the seller. We have a sliding commission scale, which starts at 15% for small deals and then scales down. I guess depending on the deal size, that can get significantly lower than that number. But we tell you that at the start of the process, once you've got a valuation, you don't have to pay us anything.
It's important to be transparent.
And it's also entirely contingent. So we only get paid if we successfully sell the business. You're not paying us an hourly rate. You're generally not paying a retainer or anything like that. So I'd recommend, if you are looking to sell your business, unless it's much larger, so say as deals get more complex, maybe above 20 million, it's not uncommon for firms to ask for a retainer, but usually you want to find a firm which is aligned with your best interests, so they're taking a percentage. And then similar to what you said, like nothing in life is free. Same in this industry when it comes to finding good advisors. The one that charges the lowest percentage is not necessarily the best option, because the better firms have like a real team with real headcount. Most of our team are ex Big Four accountants, or they've come from big investment banks and they're used to doing billion-dollar deals, and we now have them working on $50 million deals. So we have, see, as a seller, you do not care about overhead, but you should care about the talent we have behind the deal. So we put significant, like, real money into actually selling a business, and I guess we charge accordingly. So you can definitely find cheaper companies who will do it for less. But I mean, that's the same with anything. You can find a ad agency that will work for basically nothing, find a web design firm that will work for basically nothing. You can find the cheapest possible supplier for anything, but generally not the best. So that's the way we approach it, but it's very transparent up front. Evaluation and the initial advice is always free, so it's always worth having a conversation. And then if you decide it's not a good fit, then you can obviously walk away early in the process.
I appreciate you for clarifying on that. So we've talked about the acquisition process. We've talked about preparing for a successful exit. So let's say that we're considering selling our business and we want to know the best way to do it. You know, what are the things that people should look for when trying to manage a large acquisition?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to do is establish whether or not you want to try do it yourself, or if you want to hire a firm to represent you and do it. There are your two main options. I'd say the only situation where it really makes any sense to do it yourself is if you have a relationship with a buyer who's approached you and already made an offer, which you then believe is way above market value, which is very uncommon, but it can happen. So that's why it's useful to get a valuation, because we might value a business at $20 million, but then if someone comes along and offers you 100 million, then obviously you should take the $100 million deal. But generally speaking, similar to, I guess, almost anything in business, it doesn't make sense to do it yourself. And even if the fee sounds high, you're going to save money ultimately hiring someone to represent you. Similar to hiring a good accountant, like people, or a good lawyer.
Yeah, I was going to say, or an attorney.
Yeah, or an attorney. You know that hiring a good attorney should ultimately save you money versus a cheaper attorney, or trying to do it yourself where you can just cause issues. So firstly, you do not know what you don't know. You can reach out to, like I said, the aggregators. There are probably 20 aggregators out there who have raised money, and they will all love to tell you why they're the best or only buyer for your business and make an offer. But the reality is a lot of deals happening aren't selling to aggregators. They're selling to private equity firms, strategic buyers. We have an entire team that will spend weeks or months reaching out to potential buyers. There's no way you can run that process yourself, because you just don't have access to the buyers, and they often won't take it credibly if they're being approached by a seller directly. Whereas if you're getting reached out to by an M&A firm, similar to if you think about any sort of like professional referral, if you get reached out to by a firm that you know does work in that industry, you're likely to take the approach a little bit more seriously. And like bigger buyers like working through M&A firms because they know that we've run a process to get the business ready for sale. So they know that the accounts will be in good order. They know we have reasonable expectations around valuation. We wouldn't have just made up. We know that the seller is motivated to sell. We know that everything else is prepared. We know the process will go smoothly. So often they're willing to pay a premium because of the fact it's gone through a process. So while it might seem that you are, let's say you're paying us 10% on a $10 million deal, which is not necessarily exactly what we would quote as a fee, but hypothetically, paying us $1 million, that's a lot of money. But if we can get you $12 million for the business that you would have sold yourself for 9, then yes, you sold a business for 9 million, you haven't paid any fees, but you've actually lost money versus us selling it for more money. And that's probably a realistic kind of delta in expectations. Yes, you can definitely sell yourself, but you are on average not going to get as much as what you pay us minus our, or sorry, what you get paid through us minus our fee, plus the fact we do a lot of the work for you. So that's our usual sales pitch. It's not necessarily that you should use us because you're paying us for the value of the work. It's the fact we will get you a higher valuation than you'll be able to get yourself. It's not that you can't do the deal yourself, because you can.
And it also goes back to what you said earlier too, that $20 million, your valuation, somebody offers you 100 million. Well, just flip those. Somebody offers you 20 million, then you find out the valuation is 100 million, right? So it's important to do your due diligence, your research, get your free business valuation, and work with the right people in order to sell your business, because you want to leave it in the right hands. So just in closing, Thomas, do you have any final tips, thoughts, closing remarks for our listeners or viewers?
Yeah, so say my tips, like first thing to do is figure out what you're actually trying to achieve. If you're trying to build $1 billion business, what you should be doing in your business is probably different from the person trying to build $1 million business. And there's nothing right or wrong with either of those. Building a $1 million business is a fantastic achievement. So is building $1 billion business, but you need to figure out what you want to do. And that will help professionals like you and I advise people what their best plan is. So figure out early on what your own personal goal is. It's not something anyone else can tell you. It's personal. Discuss it with your spouse, other family members, stakeholders in your life, business partner or business partners if you have partners. Get on the same page early on. Or the same if you have a time-based goal. If you know you want to go travel the world in 12 months' time, then that's your time you have to work towards if you're going to sell. If you're really early in your business, and I'd say generally below $1 million in revenue is early, you should really not be worrying about selling. You should be focusing your time on growing your business. You can listen to this podcast and hopefully it will give you some good information, but ultimately your business is going to be worth more if it's bigger. So there's no point sitting there putting all these things in place to make your business more sellable versus just focusing on the growth. Because if you double revenue, that probably offsets a lot of other things you could or should otherwise be doing. And then finally, again, this is kind of more of a sales pitch, but it's never too early to reach out and have a free, no obligation conversation about valuation, because you may well approach us, get a valuation. You could be a very long way away from what you want to achieve, or you could be much closer to your goal or even beyond your goal than you realize. So there's never any harm in reaching out. It doesn't cost you anything. I know lots of kind of companies in the industry you can speak to figure out what's a good fit, because you may decide you want to try sell your business yourself. It's just in general, we've seen a lot of horror stories, and people that work with us will make more, even if they have to pay us a fee. It's all really ultimately offset.
So let me ask you just in closing. So say somebody does reach out to you early in the process, would you be able to work with them, kind of like give them tips, tricks, tutorials and more to be able to increase their business valuation, like kind of like a mentoring process? So
for sure, that's absolutely what we do. So we have clients that we've worked. We had a client earlier this year, can't tell you the exact number he sold his business for, but between 10 and 20 million. We first met him in 2012, and we spent 9 years, not necessarily giving him advice for that business, but teaching him a little about the process, sold a couple of much smaller businesses for him. And when it came to his bigger business, which he's now ultimately sold and never has to work again if he doesn't want to. I think he has actually started a new business already, but that was not necessarily something he has to do because he owns all of the business. We started having that conversation 8 years ago. So as long as not our condition, but if you want to reach out to us, we just want you to be like honest and clear with what you're trying to achieve. So don't say, oh, I really want to sell like soon, so give me a valuation. Because if you take advantage of the free advice, then we're less likely to reciprocate. But if you're like quite open and honest and say, hey, look, I'm not ready to sell now, I just want to get an idea of what my business is worth, I'm more than happy to help you. I guess just with any like professional relationship, be respectful, be honest of like what you want. I'm more than happy to help. And that process could take years, and that's fine. We've been here 11 years. In 11 years time, I might have moved my desk, but we'll probably still be doing exactly the same thing.
And that's one of the biggest takeaways too. If you're going to sell your business, it's really about relationship building, because you want to pass off your business to the hands of someone that you know is going to take the best care of your business possible. So for more great tips on selling a business, FE International offers free evaluations to figure out what your business is worth. You can get that free evaluation by clicking the link in the description box below this video. Contact Thomas and his friends at FE International. They will take care of you. So what's your next step? Reach out to the team at FE International for tips, tricks, and best practices on growing or selling your business. They're experts and they're there to help you grow. Thomas's team will take great care of you, just like hundreds and thousands of customers they've helped in the past. And if you really want to level up your e-commerce strategy, then watch this video next. It's called 5 Proven E-commerce Marketing Strategies to 10x Your Business. And you'll learn insider secrets from Tanner Tozan and CEO Adam Weiler on how to scale 7- and 8-figure e-commerce businesses.